Hey everybody, it's Skully. I know I've kind of made some videos in the past about medication regarding mental illness and, you know, how it's kind of controversial because, people wonder if it's necessary or if mental illness in itself is even real or not. I don't know, people are skeptical about it for some reason. Um, I wanted to make a video kind of diving a little deeper into medication and mental illness just to kind of provide more insight on this topic. Um, I do have personal kind of experience with this kind of thing too, so I always kind of figure, if I can take things from my life, especially things with mental illness, and talk about it to make it hopefully easier for other people, I'm all for that. So, um, yeah, there's many different types of medication for mental illness. Sometimes medication for mental illness is lifelong, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes people take one medication for mental illness, sometimes they may take several, they may not take any. Um, as helpful as medication is, it can also be very tricky and even very dangerous for people. There's not one magic pill that works for everybody. They interact with other medications, or they can anyway. They can do things like lessen effect of birth control. Some of them can even cause birth defects, some, in pregnancy, and some can even cause and or increase suicidal tendencies as well. So that's why, especially treating things like depression can be very difficult. And then there's, of course, especially because there's different types of depression too. There's different types of certain mental illness, like anxiety and stuff, that, may respond better to one medications versus another, or may even respond to other things better. Compliance with medication is not always easy. Not only is there things like side effects and interactions with other food and medications, I think honestly the stigma around mental illness is kind of part of what makes it difficult for people to keep taking their medications. They don't want people asking questions about it or butting into their personal business. There are people who suffer from various types of mental illness that are in denial about it. That may sound weird, but if you have days, especially like bipolar disorder, where you feel better, or depression where you feel better, you may think, screw it, I don't need these medications, I'm fine. So you stop taking them. You're not supposed to, but some people do. And there's some medications that are very dangerous if you stop taking them very suddenly, because they can cause withdrawal symptoms because your body becomes used to taking that every day, certain levels that it's used to, that, it drops below that in your system. Your body's like, hey, where is it? I want it, give it to me now. Oh, I don't have it? Well, that's a problem. Before you know it, you get these horrible symptoms like shakiness and anxiety, sweating. That's honestly just to touch the surface of it, because you can have more symptoms than that. But yeah, withdrawal is not a fun thing, and a lot of people don't realize even things like psychiatric medication, or even if you were to get off pain medication like Vicodin, can cause that. So that's why you're not always, and even stopping something like steroids can be very hazardous for you too, and that's why you're not supposed to stop medications without doctor's supervision, because they can cause problems too. And a lot of people don't always know that kind of thing until it happens. So it's definitely something to consider if you're ever taking medication, even if it's just for a certain period of time. Just really, really keep up with your doctor about that stuff. It's very important. And honestly, it's easy to be judgmental about that kind of thing, but honestly, just keep an open mind, because you don't know what somebody's going through, whether it's in their life or with the medications at all, because people think you just take a pill and live happily ever after, and it's no. No, it's not a fairy tale, not even close. I mean, the side effects in general can be very hard for people to deal with, but even like in my case, I don't know how many people I've really told about it, but I had a period of time in my life, like maybe 10 years ago. I finding the right medication can be such a hard process, especially if you have to see several doctors like I did. And, oh, take this pill for it. Oh, that one didn't work. Try this one. What about this one? A couple of visits or so, that stuff can add up pretty quick. And in my case, before you know it, I was on several medications at a time, not knowing what was working, what wasn't. I just, and especially if you struggle with something like depression or mood related stuff, you just want to feel better. You don't want to sit there and take time to guess. And you rely on people who are more experienced than you to tell you, hey, take this one, don't take that one, take this one instead. And sometimes I think there are people that don't always know exactly how to handle that kind of thing either. All I know is, before you know it, I was on several medications. I felt horrible. They weren't working like at all. I think in my mind I thought they were because I wanted them to. I just wanted to feel better. But, here I am just doing whatever my doctor tells me to do. Before you know it, I'm on too many medications. And on the outside, I was still here, living life. And on the inside, I felt like I was an empty shell of what I used to be. I just felt like this hollow creature. I felt like this zombie. It's like I was just a ghost wandering the planet for a purpose, because on the outside I looked like I was living life, and on the inside I felt like I was dying or like I was dead already. I had no idea how medications I thought were supposed to make me feel better somehow made me feel this way. Clearly I was on the wrong ones, I'm sure. But I wasn't myself at all this went on for 2 years of not feeling like myself, knowing something was wrong, but not knowing what. And I thankfully don't remember a whole lot of it, but it was very scary. Not remembering things I said or did, reading old diary entries, not having remembered writing those entries in the first place, and when I read them, they were unbelievably dark. Like, when I read them years later, I felt like it was somebody else who wrote it, and it just made me cringe, just seeing how dark it was, how depressed I was, even though I thought in my mind that I thought I was doing okay, and really I was just existing. And it was just like this big hurricane had hit, and then by the time it was gone, huge trail of destruction left behind. And honestly, things could have been way worse, and they weren't. But I was very embarrassed about some things that had just gone on during that time, and relationships I ruined, and just because I just didn't know what was going on. I don't know, I clearly had to get my life back on track, and eventually I did. But yeah, I was definitely in denial, thinking that I was fine, that maybe if I just got on more medications I'd be okay, or I don't know. But the fact that I had seen several doctors I thought I could trust, and I don't know. I guess I didn't realize I was pushing people away that I was close to, and that I was acting out in ways I thought I never would. Like, I don't know. I guess you can only be on so many treatments at a time, and they don't always work the way you plan, and clearly in my case they didn't. So, within time things got better, and I recovered from that, but it was a very scary feeling knowing that in some way, even if it was not my intention, I did in some way kind of allow that to happen, because I just, maybe I was in too much denial, or maybe I just didn't help myself enough, listen to people enough. But I knew that once I got out of that dark time in my life, that for the rest of my life, I just knew that I couldn't go back to that ever again, and I would have to work really hard to repair the relationships I damaged, and all the damage that had happened within myself as well, and learning to forgive myself, of course, too. But Yeah, that stuff didn't all happen overnight, though. It took time to rebuild the burned bridges, so to speak. So, medication compliance now is truthfully probably worse than it was back then because not only because I had that experience of being on too many medications and being paranoid about that, but I'm not as young as I used to be, and again, medications have side effects, and if I'm more worried about having thyroid or heart issues more so than taking that medication I need every day to stay healthy, and if it's been 10 years since everything happened and I'm thinking, oh, I'm fine, I still have times where maybe I feel like I'm fine and I don't need them, well, that's because the medications are working, and that's why that tends to happen. So when you have days that you feel like you don't need your medications, it's probably because they're working. But if you have a lot of side effects with your medications as well, that is also something to talk to your doctor about, because if they're interfering with your day-to-day life, or they're causing things like heart issues or sleep issues, or issues in your bedroom life, because that can happen too, and people don't like talking about that stuff because it's embarrassing, but it can happen. So don't be afraid to bring that stuff up and talk to your doctor about it, and try another medication or therapy that may work better for you, because there are a lot of different types, and different types of people need different treatments. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, somehow falling out of that loop of taking that medication every day, thinking, oh, my heart problems will get better, my thyroid will get better, and suddenly all those old feelings, habits from years ago start to come back, and it's a very shocking feeling when you realize I really do take this medication for a reason, and I'm not just making all this stuff up. It's not just some false reality that was created. I don't know. It's just a very rude awakening, but sometimes there are things like that that can remind you to get back on track, because people are human. People think, when they think relapse, they think addiction, but relapse can be any old habit like that. It can be, like self-harming. It can be any other maladaptive coping mechanism, like, if people choose to do something like drink to cope with something like depression rather than maybe therapeutic exercises that they learned, those can be considered relapses, and they're very common. They do happen to people because sometimes when we don't feel good, we go back to and what our minds felt worked in the past, because it's very hard to try new things, to retrain your brain to heal, to move forward in comparison to what you did in the past. So just remember that that's something that is very common, and don't give yourself a hard time if you do sometimes go back to your old habits. You don't want to go back to your old habits, but sometimes they happen, and you can try again. You can start over, you can rebuild. Not everything has to be lost. And if it is like you were sober for a year and then you had a drink, I mean, you can get back on track and try again. And it is disheartening knowing that you feel like you have to kind of start over, but remind yourself that this is something you've been able to do before. You've been able to get on track before, so you can and you will do it again. So it's like, be patient with yourself for maybe taking a couple steps back, but then it's like, be your best friend, but also be your coach too. Like, be your advocate, like, okay, we're going to do this again. But still give yourself love, nurture yourself so that you can try again. And part of being human is knowing that you can make mistakes and you can learn from it, but also knowing that you still, as a person, deserve love, and you still deserve another chance to try again. Because sadly, part of recovery is knowing that you're going to take some steps back before you take more steps forward. So before you get on the path of recovery, just automatically know that. And don't be disappointed in yourself, because you've still put the work in, you've still been trying. And there's always room for improvement. There's always room for, if you have some sort of plan of recovery, you can tweak that plan and try something else if something didn't work before, because it will be trial and error. what worked for somebody else may not work for you. You may need a different approach, and that's okay. So I apologize if this was kind of all over the place. I guess I just had a lot on my mind about this, and I do hope this is something that, you know, can help people who are going through something similar. Because these kinds of things are very deep, they're very complex, and sadly they're very dark to talk about. But in life there are things that are very bleak, very dark to talk about, but they still need to be mentioned because, you know, talking about these things is very important, not only in helping yourself, but helping others as well. Things being hidden, being kept secret doesn't help them get better, so it's important to discuss them so that they can improve. So, until next time, have a great day, guys.